Hello everybody, this is 10-minute openings, and today I'm going to be talking about Yonenaga style rapid attacking Yagura. It's one of my favorite aggressive openings, and generally speaking, it's played as Gote against Sentei's Yagura Castle. So Yagura Castle generally starts like this, where your opponent is going to push their bishop pawn and bring their silver up the board. We're going to go ahead and double push the rook pawn to force our opponent to show us what their plan is, whether they're going to defend with the bishop or the silver. And in this case, when the opponent goes ahead and plays silver to 7-7, we know they're going to be playing Yagura, and we can go for this Yonenaga style. So we're going to go ahead, open up our bishop diagonal, and the exact move order here is not super important. There's a specific shape that we're going for. There's just two moves that you need to look out for that you do need to respond to accurately. One of them is this move right here, pawn to 2-6. When they play pawn to 2-6, you need to play your silver either up to 4-2 or 3-2. Not a huge difference. But we need to do this so that when pawn push comes to 2-5, we can go ahead and defend the 2-4 square with the silver. This is very important. So you have to just remember, if they start pushing their rook pawn, we need to get the silver up. Okay, so now, again, this move order, not super important. The accuracy doesn't need to be 100% with exactly how this is shown. There's some variation. The only next move that you need to be careful for is when they put their bishop back to 7-9. Now, this is when you have to push pawn to 6-4. Now, even if it comes earlier, if you see bishop to 7-9, you need to push pawn 6-4. And the reason is, if we wait to push pawn 6-4, our opponent can play bishop to 4-6, and now we can't push our pawn to 6-4 anymore without losing it. So, yeah, the two moves to remember: when they start pushing the rook pawn, you need to bring the silver up, and when they pull the bishop back, you need to push pawn to 6-4. Other than that, you can kind of transpose and pick and choose exactly which moves you want in what order. But those are the ones that are critical if you actually want to play this Yonenaga style. Okay. And this I would consider as the main shape of the Yonenaga style rapid attack. And the idea behind the opening is we're only going to defend our king with these two golds. So most of the time when you learn about how to castle your king, you learn you want to have 3 generals guarding your gold, guarding your king, 2 golds and 1 silver. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to bring our silver out to 4-4, and we're going to attack the Yagura castle head on with an all-out attack using our bishop, our rook, both our silvers, and the knight. So it's a very committed attack, and it's very difficult to defend. Okay, so I would say one of the obvious plays that people are going to make is just bishop 6-8. This is more of kind of a laid-back, chill move where they just want to castle their king into a Yagura. And against that, we're going to go ahead and make this silver 4-4 move. This is really one of the characteristic moves of this opening, and we're going to start attacking right away. Now, how do we attack with this opening? Almost always, you're going to be starting with one of 2 pawn pushes. Pawn 5-5 or pawn 6-5. And generally speaking, after you make that move, you're going to push the other pawn. So basically, you're starting with these 2 pawn pushes. Now, when they take the pawn initially, you don't want to take back with the silver right away, because if you do, they can just drop the pawn and kick your silver back. So what you want to do is basically sacrifice 3 pawns. 1, 5th file, 2nd, 6th file, 3rd, 8th file. And what these 3 pawn sacrifices do, how 5-5 works, it brings our silver into the game, also backed up by the bishop. The pawn sack on 6-5 activates our knight, which attacks the silver. It also, after this, lets our right silver up the board. And then the pawn sack on the 8th file activates our rook, and sometimes it's pretty rare, but you can bring the knight this way as well. So these are the 3 pawn sacrifices that you're generally going to be making in this opening. So from here, now we can start our attack. Number 1, in this specific position, you want to start with the knight. Sometimes you can also start with the silver, but generally speaking, if your opponent's silver is still on 7-7, it's really nice to start with the knight jump because you have tempo on the silver. In some cases, we'll see a little bit later, the silver will be back on 8-8, in which case you'd want to come with the silver. Okay, so we're going to start with the knight, and we're going to get our attack going immediately. If our opponent retreats the silver to 8-8, now we're cooking. Silver's here, bishop's backed up, so pawn drop doesn't work. Pawn drop's coming, then the gold is dead. And if you get this position, you're pretty much already in a completely dominating position. So instead, they're going to have to come forward with the silver, in which case we're going to go ahead and support the knight with our right silver. And if you're a good player, you might see a potential problem with how we've played this, which is that our opponent can actually take this knight. And when we recapture the silver, a pawn drop on 6-6 actually captures our silver. It can't run here because the gold defends, and we can't run back here because of the pawn. But actually, this is a knight sacrifice. And we're going to go ahead and play silver to 5-5, give up this silver, but in exchange, we get pawn drop on 6-6. And this is basically, one of the ways that our attack can succeed. So either way the gold runs, we're just going to drop our silver. They take, we're going to take with the pawn. And when the gold takes back, we can just drop back another pawn. And this is completely dominating attack. So this is kind of like best case scenario for how the attack can go, where your opponent kind of just tries to castle their king, and our attack just works. They take our pawns, and we're just going to attack. So let's quickly take a look at potential counterattacks for the opponent. What if they don't just blindly defend? This one is actually quite common, and it's pawn to 3-5. And you can see this is even before we've been able to bring our silver out. And the idea here is pretty simple for the opponent. It's to trade, activate the bishop, and then they get to trade a pawn on the third file, and then they'll bring their bishop back to 6-8. So compared to what we did before, they've been able to successfully trade the pawns, and then they can potentially try and threaten pawn trade on the second file. Here we're going to go ahead and take back. They're going to take the pawn, which threatens this bishop promotion. This is pretty common. I actually feel very comfortable playing against this because we get to play this move, which we wanted to play anyway, with the tempo on the bishop. A very common response is to go ahead and just retreat the bishop. But in this case, we also have a very similar attack to what I showed in the first line, which is pawn 5-5, pawn takes, pawn 6-5, pawn takes, pawn 8-6, pawn takes. Again, these are the three key pawn sacrifices you want to make to enable the attack. But here actually we're going to play one more in-between move before we actually start bringing our silver or our knight. And this is a very important move where if you have the pawn to play it, you want to, it's pawn drop on 8-8. So what this does is it pulls one of either the gold or the silver away from this sixth file that we're attacking on, and our attack's going to break through. The best move for the opponent is actually to take with the silver. It's a bit more solid, but here is where, because the silver is not on 7-7 anymore, it's actually better to start with the silver. Now you might think, okay, they just drop a pawn. Okay, maybe we can go in, trade off, and get the bishop in, but then they can just drop a pawn and you're going to have to retreat. But actually here, we can just play pawn 6-6. Basically, we're willing to make this trade because, if they take here, we take here, gold takes. Now bishop drop forks the rook and the silver. And this is one of the good reasons for sacrificing the pawn on 8-8. So here they're going to have to run the gold. But if they run the gold, we actually have two options here. One is to just play knight 6-6. But actually the best move in this position is silver takes 5-6. Now, if the gold takes, we have pawn promotion sacrifice on 6-7, gold takes, and now we take the silver, and we're going to get all of these pieces. Our king is still relatively safe. His golds are not so connected. They're not so close to the king anymore, and the king's going to have to run to the middle of the board, and we're in a really dominating position here. I mean, we could take the knight with tempo. So again, I showed a few lines here that are obviously very good where the attack is working. But I just wanted to kind of showcase the attacking lines and nature of this opening and the types of attacks when things go well that you get, and it feels really good when they succeed. If you're interested in learning more of the ins and outs of this course, some of the details, what are Sentei's actual best lines and how can they defend this, I have recently launched a new website called Shogi Craft. And there's not a ton of courses on it yet, but one of them is this Yonenaga style rapid attack Yagura course. Right now, all of the courses that I have on the site are free because I'm just starting out. And really, I would probably call this a prototype. And you can see 37 lessons in the 10 minutes that this video is. I basically went over 3 of them. So you can kind of get a sense of the type of content that's going to be in this course and about how much content you're going to get based on what I just showed in this video. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. I would love to hear if you've tried this out and how your games go with this opening. And again, if you want to learn and dive really deep into this opening, check out the course on shogicraft.com. Thank you.